Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Rosie Murphy.
And I'm Sammy Roth, and this is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
We are in Season 3. We have reached Episode 6, I Do.
This is a Kate episode. Kate gets married to Nathan Fillion in this flashback, for those who may have forgotten that fun tidbit.
It's taco night.
It's taco night. Not copyrighted, though. Not copyrighted Taco Tuesday. We've got more from our interview this week with Jean Higgins, the final segment with Jean, actually, so we will be saying goodbye to her this week and moving on to Nestor Carbonell next week.
Let's get right into it. As always, we start each episode with our hot takes on the episode we just watched. Sammy, what is your hot take on I Do?
So I was just really bemused by how much joy Jack took in taunting Ben about his impending death.
Yeah.
Very, I don't want to say out of character for Jack, because he has all the reason in the world after everything that Ben has done to them and getting people killed to, want Ben to die a painful death, but just, not a side to Jack that we get to see very often when Ben says to him, first Jack just deciding not to do the surgery is one thing, but then, which is a death sentence, and then when Ben says,
"Well, Jack, I'm very disappointed in your decision."
Well, Ben, at least you won't have to be disappointed for very long.
Which is just, really cruel.
Yeah, Jack is pretty harsh in this episode, which is, It's a big switch from what we saw last week, where he was kind of conciliatory and seemed to be very in control and playing the field and trying to, manipulate Ben in whatever way he could. I mean, now he's locked in and he's pissed.
Yeah.
In this episode.
And,
rightfully so.
That's his prerogative, absolutely.
Yeah.
What is your hot take, Rosie?
So, this will lead us right into our discussion of the episode, but this thing with the others is getting pretty convoluted.
No shit.
They were using Sawyer and Kate as leverage with Jack, and now they are using Sawyer as leverage with Kate in order to use her as leverage with Jack. And it's just feels like a real dicey plan here when you're relying on all these people to behave in the way that you hope they will behave. And, they kind of do. And ultimately Ben ends up doing the surgery. So I guess it works out. But was this a plan, or was this just kind of some cruelty that they felt like imposing on these captives?
I think you have hit the nail on the head of the main problem with the 6-episode arc that begins season 3. It's very hard to track the sense in any of this. I mean, was the end result of this that Kate and Sawyer were supposed to have sex and Jack was supposed to see them on the monitor? I feel like there's at least a little bit of an implication with Ben being prepared to just come on in and see Jack seeing that on the screen that this was somehow his intention, but it's...
How can you possibly pull the strings in such a way?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you are very, very good at manipulating people, which Ben is, but Ben's crew, how could he have known Danny Pickett was going to be so deeply upset that he would genuinely want to kill Sawyer and he almost kills him. In this episode, sure. Which is pretty upsetting. Or it was for me.
Same.
I don't know. I really go back and forth between Ben is an evil genius and he had this all orchestrated from the beginning, and, Ben just did a really good job of working with the cards he was dealt as they changed. And I think either way it could be true and Ben would still be a bit of an evil genius, but...
Either way, though, it's a stretch. It's a big stretch in this instance. And I just found myself wondering, instead of using the use Sawyer as leverage to get Jack to do the thing, why not just threaten to kill Kate? I mean, if they want Jack to do the surgery, why not just tell Jack, do the surgery or we'll kill Kate? I feel like that would have been simpler.
Yeah, you're right.
Just saying.
Whatever. I mean, Ben is a bit sadistic in that way, and I think he likes to see these tangled webs get woven, but you would think it would make things a bit harder to control.
You would think.
That said, I liked this episode.
Yes,
and I was
tell me
quite
why.
moved by the Sawyer Kate plotline.
Go on.
So I had forgotten that they really do come damn close to killing Sawyer, and it's only in the nick of time that somebody radios to intervene. Like the stakes are really high. Sawyer and Kate both think that they're dead. They are totally hopeless. They know at this point that there is no escape. They're acting totally out of desperation. Sawyer ends up telling Kate he loves her, which I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
And was super surprised by.
And he means it, and she, without words, says the same to him.
Right.
And it seems like she means it too.
Right. Well, and she kind of said it the previous episode, but taking it back and debatable. But, yeah, I mean, I just thought it was really emotional and it was really compelling. And obviously I've been a Sawyer Kate shipper this whole time. So, always nice to see your couples come together. I also thought the flashback kind of nicely supported the main plot. I thought, it was a little heavy-handed in points.
You mean the part where the pastor emphasizes like 3 times how honest Kate is and how what you see is what you get? It's like, come on, writers, you're laying it on a little thick. I'm sorry. I like the flashback too. Go on.
That is exactly what I meant. But I thought it did a nice job of reinforcing this idea that when Kate actually loves someone, she can kind of be broken down and make that her first priority and give up on the greater mission, whatever that is. And, she did love Nathan Fillion's character, who I'm just going to call Nathan Fillion. What's his name?
His name is Kevin, but
Kevin.
we don't have to call him Kevin.
But yeah, she did almost stop running, right? She wanted to stop running, but apparently was voluntarily calling the Mercial, I guess, to tell him she wanted to stop running.
Right.
And then, of course, that didn't end up being the case for particularly long. But
well, I thought, so I think the key in the flashback is when the point when the Mercial says to her,
I'll tell you what. If you can really stay put, you really settle down, then I'll stop chasing you. But you and I both know that's not going to happen.
I think sort of what we see at the end is that the Mercial arguably is right, because it's not that the reason Kate runs at the end isn't because she thinks she's about to get caught. Like they do sort of the head fake with the passport, like you think, oh no,
right,
now she's going to have to confront this. But really at the end it's when she thinks she's going to be pregnant and is, thinking about Taco Tuesday and this sort of extremely domestic life. Like it sort of seems like she realizes, no, this isn't real. I can't handle this. Right.
This isn't who I am. I'm, sort of living a lie in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's purely a result of the being on the run thing, if it's a result of the experience that she saw her mother have with the father who she later blew up. Is it something just that's congenital to Kate, that she's not cut out for this? I don't really know. But the Mercial seems to be onto something.
I'd be inclined to say that it is just who Kate is, or that's what we're led to believe. Like, she has, her first episode is called Born to Run.
Right.
That's sort of, in the way that Sawyer's a con man, Kate is always in flight from something. That's just her essential nature, and it's not one that's ever made a ton of sense to me.
Well, here's just a random stray thought that I'll spitball and see if it turns into something. I was just thinking about how Jean Higgins was telling us last week that Evangeline Lilly did her best work when she was like out in the jungle and gunplay and doing super physical, out in the wild type of stuff, and that when she was doing like flashbacks and sort of more real world kind of domestic-y stuff, that she just wasn't quite as into it. And I guess that's just making me wonder about Kate's character as well. Maybe she's just someone who is in her element when she's out doing something exciting, having an adventure, good or bad, and that the sort of everyday life that the rest of us live, maybe she's just not that enthused by that. I think we see in this flashback she tries to be for,
right.
6 months and seems to be really loving this sort of more domestic existence, but then we realize there are just serious cracks under that.
Yeah, and I think she loves Kevin, but she doesn't love the life.
Yeah.
Like, what she says to the Mercial is that, I love this guy, I want to make this work, and she clearly hates to run from him at the end. Like, she puts something in his drink so he can't chase her. I mean, I don't think she wants to leave him. I think she just wants to leave the domesticity itself.
Yeah.
And this is a stretch, but what the heck? That's what we do here on The Hatch. Perhaps part of what is super appealing about Sawyer to Kate, despite all the things that are unappealing, is that he might be a companion in that sort of a life, right? Like,
yeah.
Also somebody who's always on the run, somebody who has never lived a settled existence, and is always, always having an adventure of one kind or another, as opposed to Jack, who is sort of risen through the ranks in a very conventional way, and is quite what we would consider settled, despite, quite a lot of, whether he's emotionally or spiritually settled certainly is an open question. But I don't know.
I actually think that that's not such a limb at all. I think that you're really, we're getting onto something here, because one of the main notes that I had about this episode, and this was something that disturbed me a little bit, but I think ties in exactly to what you're saying, is the scene when Sawyer is, about to be executed by Pickett.
Yeah.
And Kate is, sort of begging for his life. And the thing that really stood out, and this was after the whole, the I love you thing between the two of them, when Sawyer is just going to go along with it, right? I mean, Sawyer has given up here. Yeah. He is acquiesced. He is realizing that if he doesn't submit himself, that Kate's going to get killed too. He is willing to give up his life for her.
Right.
And Kate really doesn't seem to like that. At least that was my reading of the scene when Pickett, is sort of pinned him up to the wall in the cage, or whether it was Pickett or the other guy, I don't remember. Mm-hmm. And Sawyer is giving in. Kate's yelling at him, "Fight, fight." Right. She seems really upset that he's not fighting. And then again, when they take him out and Pickett gets him down on his knees so that he can shoot him, she's yelling at Sawyer, "Stand up."
Right.
And she just seems really disturbed to see Sawyer in this, in this state where he's willing to, just give his life up for her. And I was struck by that and just thought, I wonder about the sustainability of their relation, whether anything could last between them here. But it seemed like the moment he, when he's not this, sort of hard-edged, devil-may-care, fight till the last, till the last guy, when he's putting something else ahead of that, which is her, I just think it seems like it bothers her. I might be reading too much into it, but I think it speaks to what it is that she loves about Sawyer, which is that he is someone who would not make, I don't want to say go soft, because that's unfair to Sawyer, but maybe that's how she sees it.
No, I think that's really astute. Like, I think you could read that two ways. One is that she hates to see Sawyer kind of embarrass himself, isn't the right word, but kind of lower himself to that place where he's just, letting it be done to him, rather than he's passive rather than active. But I wonder if part of it is also that Kate hates to see him doing that for her. Like,
I think it is.
Yeah, because I think part of what we see with Kate in this flashback, as well as throughout her story, is that she'll never believe that she deserves that. She'll never allow anybody to do that kind of thing for her. Like, part of what seems to really trouble her during when she's leaving Kevin at the end of the flashback is that she's, she feels like she has to tell him the truth about who she is, at least in some very, very small amounts. Like she feels undeserving of this life. And that's part of what rankles her so much about it.
And also part of, and this gets at what you were saying, part of why she identifies with Sawyer so strongly, because I think she sees that in him too. Yeah.
They both have a bit of a, I don't deserve anything good about them.
Right.
And kind of satisfied in that, like, I've done my share of bad things, and I don't deserve anything good, and you know what? That's just life.
Right. And if there's a future for Kate and Sawyer, it's certainly not them, getting a house somewhere and doing day jobs. It's Sawyer out doing cons and Kate on the run, and them, meeting up where and when they can and doing crazy adventures together.
Right.
I mean, that's the only realistic scenario for Kate and Sawyer, and I think that she sees that crumbling a little here.
Right, because she sees that he might not stick to the plan.
Yeah.
As it were. Yeah, huh.
Like, I don't know, just I watched that scene and it made me feel kind of bad. Like, oh, I'm such a Kate Sawyer shipper, but if that's a big turnoff for Kate, this probably isn't going to work.
Right.
And eventually we do, and this is sort of hindsight, but eventually we do see Kate, Sawyer, like, really settle down with Juliet and become, like, a much more, thoughtful, slow-moving, settled type of person who's... Not that he loses his essential Sawyerness.
They live in one of the other's houses, and they work very day-to-day jobs, and they're just Sawyer, happy to do that. And
I think Kate never would have done that with Sawyer. It works with Sawyer and Juliet, but it wouldn't have worked with Kate and Sawyer.
One fun thing about this episode that I'd forgotten is that it ends on a really, really tough cliffhanger.
I can't be without you!
You swore. Go.
Yes, I said!
Go, now.
I can't!
Hey, damn it, run!
You have Ben's about to die, theoretically. Kate's on the run. Sawyer still might get killed. We got a lot of balls in the air here at the end of, I guess this was the mid-season finale?
Yeah, sort of the early mid-season finale. And still nobody knows where Carl is, the biggest drama of all.
Have we? Oh yeah, we have briefly met Carl.
Yes, very briefly.
He's in the cages, but... oh, jeez.
Dear. No, it's a wonderfully dramatic ending, and I do love the Kate dammit run thing. I remember I guess this was maybe before like memes on social media, but I feel like there were 2006 versions of memes about that with people substituting other words for Kate and run, like name, dammit, verb type constructions. That's my recollection. Maybe someone who was in the forums at the time can remind us about that.
That's funny. Please share your favorites if you have any. A couple of additional thoughts. Why do you think Jack ultimately decides to do the surgery?
That's such a good question.
I'm glad you also don't have an answer for it, because I just don't know.
So one theory, I was trying to think about this. Because I think we're led to believe at first that when Jack says to Ben after he sees Kate and Sawyer in the cage, like, I need to get the hell off this island. Like, the early implication of that is Jack realizes that he lost to Sawyer with Kate and just feels terrible and wants to get as far away as possible, which is kind of a lousy explanation and turns out to not be what he does. But I do think that maybe when you look at what he does in the surgery and trying to get Kate and Sawyer out, that maybe there's a little bit of a hero complex element for Jack here, where his reaction to seeing Kate and Sawyer, like, that maybe there's some part of him that feels like, okay, even though I know this sucks for me, like, I am the hero, so I have to go the extra mile now and get them out of here together, because that's what the good guy does.
Right.
Maybe that's when he sees the opportunity and thinks, like, okay, I'm upset about this, but I have to get them out because that is what Jack would do.
That makes more sense to me, I think. And I wonder if he'd seen them not, cuddling, but instead just, like, talking to each other. Like, would he have had... I feel like the sex almost doesn't matter if that's his thought process. Like, he remembers that, like, oh, this might be a chance to free these people who... Right. I'm their leader, and that's my job.
Right, and that doesn't seem what it is. Like, I guess I'm theorizing that this is Jack having, like, an overreaction to his own being unhappy. Like, like, I'm trying to think of a good comparison. Like, if you're the sort of person who feels like you've got to be nice to people all the time, and there's someone who does something that's really not nice to you and pisses you off, and then you go the extra mile to do something, like, pleasant for them the next day. because that's going to make you feel good about yourself. Like, I went and I helped the guy who's pissing me off.
I don't know that I really see that instinct in Jack.
Okay.
I mean, when Jack gets pissed at somebody, he's pissed at them. Like,
but he also knows that he really has no reason why he should be pissed here. Like, nobody's actually wronged him.
Right. So maybe it's just right. Like, he has no like claim to Kate or whatever. So maybe it's just a reaction against himself. Like, he recognizes his jealousy and he's mad about the existence of the jealousy. Yeah,
that's exactly what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Thank you for actually articulating that.
That could be. Yeah, and so he tries to overcome it with extra heroism.
Yeah, extra and sort of self-sacrifice in a way.
Right. Yeah, that
like
could
he's
be.
gonna
and and maybe then his deal with Ben is like, all right, fuck it, they can go free, and if they want to be together, that's fine. But in that case, I'm getting off this island. Maybe. That's plausible.
I don't have an. I mean, do you have a different theory or another?
No. Way to look at? I was pretty. I thought about this a lot and did not come up with a good answer for what it is that flips the switch in Jack, because he seems quite set on not doing the surgery and letting Ben die. And that keeps him, I guess, from having to enter into this like weird secret pact with Juliet where they secretly kill him during surgery, right? Like, Jack knows enough to know he's going to die anyway, and apparently going to die pretty soon.
That actually ties nicely into my hindsight, if you want to do hindsight.
Go for it.
I don't know if you had any other big points to raise.
No, I think yours is as good an explanation as any. It makes sense. I don't have a good alternative.
Well, I was just thinking, and my hindsight is that while I am obviously very, very glad that Ben doesn't die on the operating table because he is a wonderful character who we come to know and love over the next few years, I found myself wondering, like, gee, it would have been really interesting to see, like, how the power struggle amongst the others would have played out if Ben had died on the table. Like, I just feel like there's no really natural leader that everyone else would have congregated around.
Yeah,
like,
Ben doesn't really have a second in command.
He doesn't, and you could argue that, you know, Richard maybe, but because he's the one who can talk to Jacob, but Richard doesn't seem like he probably would want to be the leader.
No.
And you've got, I mean, in a couple episodes, we're going to be introduced to Mikhail Bakunin, who, you know, sees himself as very close to Ben and a trusted lieutenant, and he's kind of an egomaniac, so I could see him making a play.
Right, but he's not really part of other society.
He's not. And Tom sort of seems like he has a little bit of authority, but also definitely not a natural leader type. Like, Danny Pickett is out there and all hot-headed. Right. Juliet might try to build a faction around her because she's, you know, especially if this is a result of, you know, her machination to kill Ben.
Right.
Like, you could go a lot of different directions with it. It could have been interesting to see that play out.
Yeah. Huh.
It's a random thought, but it occurred to me.
No, it is an interesting thought, and we have so little evidence one way or the other that it's really fun to just spin out all those different threads. Because they're all as plausible as any, really. Because of, you know, of course, Ben does survive and retains an iron grasp on power, at least for a little while, until John shows up. And the only other thing in my notes was, I don't know exactly when in the episode I wrote this, but you might. I wrote, Sayid is again suspicious of this whole enterprise.
I know.
Good for him.
My note was that Sayid is once again a human lie detector with Locke. Remember when Leonard Dick told us that he was vice president of Sayid Inc. and we decided we were president of Sayid Inc.?
Yeah, I mean, that will spin itself out in the coming episodes. But
good times.
Always good to see Sayid being Sayid.
Always. Before we move on to the interview, I just wanted one quick note. When we talked about Echo last week, we had that part of our conversation where we talked about what it means to survive and the definition of survival, because Echo says, you know, I only did what I needed to do to survive. And anyway, I can't believe we forgot to bring up, we could have referenced the iconic Jack Locke season 1 finale scene where Locke says, the path ends at the hatch, it all ends at the hatch, and Jack says, no, we're opening the hatch so that we can survive, to which Locke responds, survival is all relative, Jack.
Huh.
So Lost has tread this ground before.
I didn't make that connection.
I wish I had. Anyway, to the Jean Higgins?
Yes, so this will be our final segment with Jean. She, you know this by now, but was co-executive producer on Lost all 6 seasons, and is going to finish it out with telling us just some closing thoughts on the show and then what she's been working on now.
One more season 3 question, and then I'll start to wrap up. I mean, you mentioned earlier that it's sort of well known. It's creatively they felt like they were in cages at the beginning of season 3, and I think that was a part where even some of the fans felt like it was dragging a little bit. What part of the show do you think was the strongest creatively?
Wow, hard to overcome the pilot. I mean, the pilot was massive. And the guy going through the engine was just a shocker. Although my father, who designed airplanes, looked at me and says, that would never happen. I went, I know, but it's great for the movies.
Yeah, there would also never be a monster made of smoke. So.
Yeah. And I think it was just the arc of the characters. From being completely lost on every level. From physical to spiritual, to the resolution at the end, where you find who you truly are and the acceptance of self. I think that was the biggest issue.
Are you still in touch with people from the show?
Some, not all.
Yeah.
Not all. My UPM still works with me.
What's unit production manager?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was a guess.
She's like
really know that.
No, that's good. No, she's like my right arm. She's great. We do show after show together. And there's been a couple of times where we split up and she'll go to Georgia and I'll go to South Africa or I'll go to Vancouver where, she can't go.
And I've sort of asked you this before we started talking, but do people still want to talk to you about Lost, or is what we're doing now unusual to revisit it now 10, 15 years later?
No, there's always questions. Yeah. I'll go for an interview for a show, and they'll go, yeah, but I really want to ask you these questions about Lost afterwards. And I go, okay. So, no, it's still very much present.
What have you worked on since then?
I've done a lot of pilots. I like doing pilots because I like creating the world. It's like as with Lost.
Sure.
Give me a script and I will create the world for you. So I did a pilot called Sawyers, which for various reasons did not go, in Vancouver, and I did one in a whole dystopian thing on a mountaintop outside of Salt Lake City. Been to Georgia a number of times.
The country or the state?
The state.
Okay. I know there's a lot of production in the state, but yeah.
Yeah, a number of times. Like I said, the one in South Africa was fun. I hadn't been there for quite a while. And it was a lot of visual effects, so that was fun as well. And did a show called Game of Silence for a while. Loved that. It was really too dark for network. Wish it had been on cable. Probably would still be going. Did a show called Notorious. And just finished one called On Becoming a God in Central Florida.
I've heard of that. I think because the
very
title is so interesting.
And very quirky.
Okay.
Yeah.
When does that air?
August. Showtime.
August on show. So is that your most recent project?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So On Being a God in Central Florida, August Showtime, that is what our listeners should look out for if they want to see your next show.
Yeah, it's very different.
All right. Last question here. Did you make the man behind the curtain, or not the man behind the curtain, that was an episode, the new man in charge, that epilogue that aired on the season 6 DVD? I saw your name attached to that.
Probably. I don't remember. I used to do a lot of podcasts on the side.
Yeah.
I'm a complete publicity hag when it comes to my shows, very honestly, because to me, the network's going to spend whatever money they have budgeted for advertising. Uh-huh. Publicity is free advertising.
Right.
So it just means you get the show out there. And it started early on with Lost because everybody would look at me like I was crazy. And it was sort of a not ABC normal fare, you know? It was sort of dark, and it wasn't bright, and Desperate Housewives kind of thing. So I had called up the publicity people and said, okay, this is what I would like to do. And I said, by the end of season 1, I want the men are lost in GQ, whatever. Want the women are lost in Vogue, Bazaar, Vanity Fair, you name it. They all laughed at me.
Why?
And then you should see, because they thought I was nuts. And you should see the most exquisite layout in Vanity Fair of the entire cast. Standing in the water. It was beautiful. We did everything.
Do you know, is that usual for sort of one of like the top producers to be doing publicity strategy like that, or you just like to do it?
It wasn't strategy, and I wouldn't step on ABC's toes, but I would say that I kept the door very open for them, and we would pitch them ideas all the time. There was a girl by the name of Samantha Thomas who worked for Brian Burke, one of the executive producers, and then there was JJ's assistant, and they were sort of my on the mainland side. Mm-hmm. And I went, okay, guys, you're my arm over there. And it was to the point where, for example, we were Apple's first podcast ever. And
really?
Yes. It was so early on back then. Podcasts were, what's a podcast, right?
Wasn't it a video podcast?
Yeah, it was a video podcast.
Yeah,
and then we would do them on a quasi-regular basis, and we would do mobisodes on the side.
Right.
And turns out we were supposed to, and then I found out we were the only show that was actually doing it. Everybody else was sort of going, we can't do that. And I would do, it all fed each other, for example. It was... I always made sure we did Make-A-Wish. We would do a lot of charity. I mean, the island was very good to us. I wanted to give back to it. And things would happen. Like we found out one day that our entire day's work was destroyed because they had X-rayed our negative. Ooh. And because we were one of the last shows to shoot film. Even though Walking Dead still shoots film. They shoot 16. We were shooting 35. And we found out that they had X-rayed it coming over, not when we sent it back. So I had an entire pallet worth of film that was now useless, which became a large insurance claim, but we also had to reshoot the entire day. And it was, okay, this can't happen. How do we fix it? Well, flying over once, I sat next to a woman. Turns out she was in charge of the Heart Association charity in Hawaii. We became friendly. And her husband was the guy who ran Matson lines from Hawaii back and forth. So I called her up and said, it was sort of like Neighbor Terry, right? And said, I need to talk to your husband. So thereafter, took a little more planning because it was a longer run than an airplane over. But Matson shipped over my film with the vegetables because vegetables aren't X-rayed.
Wow.
So
that's what you did from then on to get your film over?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Mm-hmm. That's lovely.
So it all works.
Yeah.
You keep expanding the world because it's all synergistic. Each part helps the other part.
Jean, thank you so much for
Quite
being
all
with
right.
us on
Did
the
I
Hatch.
answer everything you needed?
I could ask you lost questions all day, but we'll leave it there.
It's like, okay.
It's weirdly disappointing to me to hear that the pilot is still her favorite episode to have worked on.
Yeah, same.
The pilot, I mean, clearly the pilot is tremendous. It won both of our hearts. It won, millions and millions of hearts around the globe. And I guess working on a pilot means a particular thing in show business. Like, I know you do... The pilot has to be a certain level of good in order to, win sort of a contract for the rest of the show and stuff. But to work on every single episode of Lost and still have that be the pilot is, I've never tried to rank like my top 10 episodes of Lost and stuff, but there's just so much other good stuff.
It's true. I guess part of that reflects the
there.
fact that it's different for fans than when you made it. Like,
right.
For them, the pilot is going to have a certain significance that it's never going to have to us. Because for us, we watch the pilot, and the next week we watch the next thing.
Right, and it builds and builds and builds. And
right.
we don't have any anticipation going into the pilot, and the anticipation is part of what makes it so fun. Like, there's no tension to be relieved because there's no tension yet.
Right. It was like, oh, this is cool, a new thing, it's great.
Right.
But that's different than like, holy shit, the incident.
And Jean and others have told us about just sort of what a heavy lift the pilot was itself, which must have made, like, completing it feel so good. Like, they had to actually get the plane there. They had to do all of these effects. They had to take care of the beach in such a way and not let things go out into the ocean. And the way it felt to the cast and crew must be so special, which, you know, is concealed behind the scenes, I guess.
Yeah. So we will be back next week. Next week is not in Portland. It's a Juliet episode. And it is also the first appearance of Nestor Carbonell as Richard Alpert. So we will be sharing the beginning of our interview with him.
This interview is a real treat. I know I say that all the time, but this one really is.
And they're all a treat, but this one's especially a treat.
Oh my gosh. Nestor Carbonell is a wonderful person. Anyway, in the meantime, it would be a pleasure if you would talk to us on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast and at facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast.
You know what's coming next. Please, if you haven't done it, rate our show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Leave a review if you're feeling especially friendly. It only takes a minute.
If you'd like to leave us a hot take that we can play on the show, you can call 9546-DHARMA. Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen, and our cover art is by Danny Roth.
And we will be back next week.
Namaste.